I think we would agree that facts matter, whether it's the media, whether it's your family, whether it's your friendships, whether it's business. Getting the story straight is important. Now, you remember the game Telephone when we were kids, where one person would start out telling another one a story, and then share that story with another person, and another, and another. So by the time it reaches the fifth or sixth person, it doesn't resemble the original at all. Well, if you've ever cared for an aging parent or loved one, well, you already know that the telephone game is real. Mom goes to the doctor. She hears one thing. She shares that with your sibling who hears something completely different. And by the time it gets to you, that story's changed 3 times. And it's not because people don't care. It's not because people are lazy. It's because there's too much information out there. Oftentimes, people are emotional. It's highly charged. You're not really listening to everything because you're trying to be in the moment right there. People just communicate differently. In this conversation on the Advanced Adulting Podcast, we're going to talk about that today, about communication, about family dynamics, and about getting it right. My guest is Crystal Gallo. She is the founder and CEO of Innerhive. It's an app that helps families capture, summarize, and share medical conversations, medical information, and caregiving information so everyone gets the same set of facts and can interpret it properly. We talk about why caregivers burned out and how it sneaks up on you. We're going to talk about the emotional and logistical chaos of coordinating care and communicating information. We're going to talk about sibling dynamics that no one really talks about. We're going to talk about good intentions and how sometimes that can lead to miscommunication. And we're going to talk about how you can advocate for yourself and your family. I think that's a huge one. You're going to love that part of the conversation. I think you're going to get a lot out of this, so let's get to it. I'm Bradley Richardson, and this is Advanced Adulting. Crystal Gallo, welcome to Advanced Adulting.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to talk to you for a number of reasons. I love what you do. I love what you're doing with Innerhive, and I love the space that you serve of caregivers and families because so many of us need it. And one of the things, this conversation is going to be interesting, even though you have a tech company. This is really about communication. This whole thing is about communication and speaking and understanding clearly. I mean, and that's where so many families seem to get it wrong, right?
Yeah, there's a lot in communication. I feel like when you're missing information or something gets lost in translation or someone kind of puts their own spin or bias on it, you find yourself questioning, do I have the right information? Do I have all of the information? Is this the accurate information? So, yeah, I think when you can start from the same baseline and you've got the facts and maybe you're not working with fragmented pieces or lost or missing stuff, it changes things. It makes a big difference.
Well, it's funny. It's not just, we're going to talk about it in the caregiving and family perspective, but man, it's in anything. I mean, if you misinterpret something or you operate on, some of the facts, it affects everything, not just, what you hear from a doctor or a family member, but your relationships at work, everything. It's, we've talked about this idea of, the children's game Telephone, right? When you say one thing and, by the time it gets to the next person or the next person, people down, you have a completely different story.
For sure. You're sitting in a doctor's appointment, and whether it's for yourself or for someone else that you're caring for, you're extending assistance to, love, whatever, people interpret extending care and caregiving differently. But in any case, the doctor's talking, you're just trying to listen, you're trying to take notes, you're trying to process, you have a whole list of questions that you want to ask. Meanwhile, your anxiety is through the roof because you're not certain, you're hanging on each word. What are they going to say next? What does this mean? Should I be Googling what that was that they said? And so you end up
Right.
leaving overwhelmed and you're completely, cloudy in terms of, I don't even remember half of what was said. Nonetheless, what are the immediate next steps? And so I know for us, that was me, that was our team, that's millions of caregivers. Something that was so, core to why Innerhive, it was because people were overloaded. They were flooded with information. And so they couldn't actually be present. It's not about loads of documentation. It's not about being perfectly prepared, but it is about being present and being able to focus on, being there for someone, understanding what's happening. And so Innerhive was really born from, what is this information overload that we're all struggling with? How can we capture, summarize, and then be able to share crucial moments so we can actually be present?
Well, I love that being present. Again, this is applicable to so many aspects of your life, just being present in the moment. But look, we have so much information coming at us. Overwhelm. I used to not like the word overwhelm because I think people used it as a crutch. When oh, I'm overwhelmed. But we're legitimately overwhelmed now with so many things, so much information coming at you, so many resources to get things from. And especially in something like this where and we say caregiver, but let's just put it into context here for a lot of people. It's the idea of, let's say your loved one, your mom or dad, whatever, goes to a doctor's appointment. And maybe you go with them, maybe you don't, but you have all of this information coming at you. Sometimes it's not positive. Sometimes it's something you don't understand. Sometimes you're just processing it, the emotional, true, legit
Mhm.
overwhelm of it, plus all the stuff that you think you're going to have to go be Dr. Google and figure out what this word means. And I think that you're right that it's so tough to be right there present in the moment to get some sort of clarity out of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, the telephone game is real. It's 10 degrees removed by the time it gets to you, and you're like, are we going to Hawaii or are we going to Florida? I don't know. They're on the
Yeah.
opposite sides of the country, but for whatever reason, each time, piece of information kind of trails through, something is lost or something gets spun, or you hear something differently maybe than what was actually said. And uh, yeah, falling that information falling through the cracks, that has
Uh-huh.
impact on safety, that has impact on trust. It has impact on, when you think about transparent communication and wanting to collaborate and have that open
Hmm.
dialogue and working relationship, it has a huge impact. And then you think about a million little things when you've got that compromised safety and you're feeling uninformed to make, quality care decisions, and information's not getting shared or it's taking on its own interpretation. That's when errors happen. That's when stuff gets missed. Your quality of life in the end is what could be impacted. And then that doesn't even touch on the family dynamics. Oh my goodness.
Right.
I can't tell you, when you have, oftentimes it's one person that's largely the primary individual extending care or being there to offer support. And so even the best families, they feel strained from this because you don't
Hmm.
you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you're walking into, and that erodes
Right.
trust, and you're doing the best you can. And but when your sister's asking you for the third time, "Hey, did mom do her, PT exercises?" And you're like, "Hey,
Right.
we talked about this earlier. Also, I'm trying to run my own life and work and my own
Yep.
household, and I'm still trying to keep up." And so you find yourself like getting frustrated and snapping, and that resentment kind of builds because you feel like, "Well, I'm the only one doing this, and why don't you know what's going on?" And so that creates its own dysfunction, and then you
Yeah.
just smash this all up, and it's like each of, these million little things, they compound over time. It's the weight of
Well,
questions, of calls, of texts, of appointments, of juggling, and then you hit burnout. You miss it.
Well, yeah, and I want to talk about caregiver burnout definitely here, but you talk about these little pieces. I mean, it's this idea of death by a thousand cuts because it's not just necessarily one
Yeah.
thing. It's this pressure that truly is sandwich generation stuff. Just like you mentioned, hey, not only are you having to deal with mom or dad and the doctor's appointment, are they doing things, but dealing with your siblings, dealing with your own family, your money, your career, your kids, whatever it is. And so, yeah, that burnout hits you. But I think that one of the challenges is, a lot of us have faith in the system, and we look at the system that and assume that things are handled. It's a doctor, it's a hospital, it's a clinic, whatever. They're gonna do what's right. I know their heart's in the right place, but it seems
Yeah.
like things aren't always handled. That actually what's happening behind the scenes is kind of broken, and we don't know that. Tell me a little bit about what you've discovered, that how the system's broken that we just don't know about and can really take under our own action.
Yeah, I mean, which part would you like me to shine a flashlight on? I think there's lots of
Right.
corners where the cobwebs are sitting. I mean, I think something that was eye-opening to me in my experience was, you have this assumption that uh, everyone determines and describes and expects something different from care. And in some cases that, when you're carrying cross state lines, you're carrying cross country, there's something very sensitive. It's a very emotional journey. And so you want to respect that. You really want to make sure that you're treating, every individual with dignity and respect. And that also comes down to, well, what does that mean in terms of what are you extending for care? How are you talking about it? How are you sharing it? And
Hmm.
so there's a number of organizations that are working with families that are doing the best they can, that are, whether it's Families bring in help because they need to kind of augment their community. And
Hmm.
so they're trying to understand, where do I need the most help? How can this individual help me? And then that communication often breaks down because the family's calling and saying, well, I wasn't there today. How did it go? And a lot of times, people that are helping, whether it's neighbors, whether it's professional caregivers, they're trying to capture notes, but they're so concerned with trying to capture it all that they can't be present. And you often one has to give. And so, in a
Hmm.
lot of scenarios, when I've talked with organizations that are working with and supporting families, they're trying to capture this, but they're taking it on written paper and they're leaving it in the family's
Right.
house and then they're not sharing it. The families aren't getting these updates. If the family calls and has a question, they have to deploy someone back to the house to look in this 90s binder, written notebook, to be like, okay, did someone capture notes today? And a lot of times it's very generic notes. They don't have time to get into the details. And
Hmm.
so then that leaves the family frustrated. That lacks some information. And then you've got, whomever is helping the family in this situation of frustration because 'cause they're having to zoom in and zoom out. It's just not at their fingertips. And so, I mean, that's something that to me was mind-blowing. We've somehow managed to get perfect checklists for surgeries, and we've got all these EHR systems hooked up, which even over 400 of those don't talk to each other. But yet, when we think about how we're capturing the most critical moments and then sharing with the people that matter and
Hmm.
are invested, we've not modernized. We've not thought about how can we make technology work for us? How can we allow technology to enhance our humanity, help us be
Hmm.
present, help us be there to extend emotional support, not get caught up in this, you know, overhead of documentation that ends up being a mess that is
Right.
all written and is difficult to process and you have to go chase down and then it's time consuming and then you realize I actually don't even have any time to extend care now. I've
I think
just
that
burnt
was one of
hours looking for
yeah, I
this.
think that was one of the most eye-opening things when we first talked about this. About look, there's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of complexity when you go into a hospital, or even when you go into a doctor's office, with them taking notes and documenting it. And as the patient, you look at it and go, I don't know. You spent 5 minutes with me. I don't know how in the hell you put all this in there, but yet they do. And yet, when you leave that environment, we assume, or at least I assume, that that same level of detail and care is being extended in a home situation, a home care situation, or something else. And you and I talked about this idea of the notebook, the 3-ring notebook, or the binder. And
Mm,
I'm sitting there thinking, and that question is something that everybody has had when you're like, hey, how did mom do today? Or, how's she feeling? Or did she take her meds or anything like that? And just the idea that this information by a lot of these organizations and companies and caregivers, though well intentioned, is just, it's left with something like this that they don't really have an answer to. And
yeah.
that's mind blowing when we have this assumption that, hey, the system, they're the experts, they're the pros, they're going to know. I
Yeah,
think,
it's crushing.
yeah, it is crushing. And I think that's where, um, that's why almost becoming your own advocate seems like it's not being pushy, it's not being overbearing, it's not jumping in there, but you really have to question things and have the right facts behind it, don't you?
Yeah, there's so many yeah. If you don't have if you're not constantly advocating for yourself, I'm gonna share a story.
Okay.
Actually, super frustrating story, put a lot of fire in my body. Recently had to go to the doctor, had to get a test. I had, um, thought, typically when you get these things, you're like, "Okay, I can go get it done. I'll get the results. This is gonna be great. No big deal." So, went to the doctor, got a call, results are in. Great. Call the place that did the scanning. Unfortunately, we don't have anyone on the staff that can read the results. You're gonna need to talk to your doctor. I'm like, okay. Call my doctor. Unfortunately, the staff informs me she's out for 2 weeks. And I was like, well, that's not great. Call back the place where I got the scan. Said, okay, listen, do you have anyone I'll take? Like, when is the next radiologist on that can read this? Unfortunately, we don't know. We can give you a call back and let you know, but it's probably best to wait for your doctor. I was like, no, no, no. I already talked to my doctor's team. She's gone for 2 weeks. I'm not waiting 2 weeks. I need to know this now.
Right.
And they're like, sorry, ma'am, there's nothing we can do. So I was like, oh, screw this. Called my doctor back. I'm like, my blood is boiling at this point.
Right.
Called my doctor back. I was like, hey, listen, is there a backup doctor? Anyone? Someone that can just pull my file and read this? And they're like, well, let me look into this. Let me see if we have someone. We'll get back to you. At this point, I'm just bouncing between phone calls, trying to get information about my own body. And my
Right.
frustration is just growing. And I was like, the next person that I talk to, they're not going to want to talk to me. This is not going to be a good conversation. So
Right.
I'm waiting, trying to extend patience, end up calling back the scanning center again. And I was like, hey, listen, you know what? No, you don't have anyone. I don't have a doctor yet that can read this. Just can you send the information to me? I'll read the scan. Not advised for anyone listening, but I have some old medical training on how to read some scans. So I was like, good enough. I just want to understand. I was trying to answer a question in my own mind. And she's like, unfortunately, in order to do that, you're going to need to fill out this release form. I can send it to you. And once it's signed and we get it back, we can go ahead and process that. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me right
This is
now.
your own
I was
info.
like, forget about it. Forget about it. I was like, this is insane. I gotta, like, I'm calling, arms are up in the air. I was like, I'm over. Call my other
Right.
doctor's office back. And I was like, listen, I know you're looking into someone. Can you like put a little heat on this? I'm gonna need this now, or I'm gonna be hanging out at
Right.
your office, or I'm gonna be hanging out at the scanning center, and no one's gonna want me. This is not gonna be a good
Right.
situation. So, I mean, something basic like that is crazy, but that is literally the fire behind. I don't want to have to wait for permission to get information about myself. It's like the only way that I can ever get that is if I become available, which is crazy. If something happens to me or I'm, medically or maybe physically or mentally not sound, or that whole concept that it's behind this permission wall and that it's so much, bureaucracy and red tape to be able to advocate for my wellness is what my mind just, it hurts. I can't, it doesn't even compute with me. So, yeah, when you
Yes.
speak about advocating for yourself and your wellness and having access, like, this is putting the power in the family's hands. This is family data. This is them having a voice, them being able to capture the information that's critical to their quality of life.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. I mean, because you used the word before, family data. And I think people, we hear HIPAA, and I think that a lot of people don't understand really what that is. But, they hear stories like yours that you just shared and think, oh my God, I can't, one, they either hold their own information so private that, like they're going to be selling it, overseas or something that, oh, I don't want anybody to know. Or they hear something like you where you've been blocked from getting your own info right now. And what's interesting is, tell me what you discovered about HIPAA versus family owned data that really allows you to be your own advocate or advocate for your loved one as well.
Yeah. I feel like people ask this question a lot because they're really interested in what's happening with their information. They care about, hey, this is my personal life. There's a lot at stake here. There's a lot of emotions involved, a lot of sensitivity. And so maybe before even getting into HIPAA and that realm itself, we have a lot of families that we recognize how important it is to respect what they're going through on their journey, wherever they're at, whatever that looks like. And so we
Hmm.
take, data protection super seriously in terms of we've been there, we're caregivers, we get it. So we want to make sure and we've put the protocol and process in place so that internal access is strictly limited. And we have trained and approved people. We make sure that all the data is encrypted, whether it's moving or it's sitting at rest. We make sure that we're working with partners. So we have, AWS where the data is hosted, which is one of the most secure platforms.
Hmm.
That was a shock actually when I first visited. It's, probably more security than going through jail. I've never experienced such a process, but it really goes to show how much they also respect data and what that means for people. There's a weight around it. And then there's just no third party sharing. We're not selling data. We're here to help families. We're not here to exploit, when they're going through a vulnerable time. So there's a lot that we've put in place to ensure that we're really respecting and appreciating what families are trusting us in terms of being able to help and how we handle their data.
Hmm.
Um, so HIPAA, that's a lot of the why. We hear a lot of people going, well, what's going on? How are you treating? What does this look like?
Right.
HIPAA is very much centered around healthcare providers, health plans, direct vendors. They're covered under that. Family owned data, what's beautiful about it is the family gets to initiate access. They get to control who they share it with. They get to have that um, ownership, that feeling of not being gated, like you said, not sitting and waiting for the permission, not
Hmm.
waiting for someone else to upload their information. You're not getting trapped in a portal. You get to actually think about what are the things that matter to me? What's the information I want to capture? how do I want to remember and share that information? So, typically little nuggets of wisdom or highlights that are important to kind of inform decisions or make sure that your network is really connected and aligned.
Uh-huh.
And that's something that's really valuable when you spoke earlier about, yeah, you want to be an advocate for yourself. And in order to do that, information is powerful because information becomes insight, and that insight informs the decisions which impact your care. It impacts, preferences and quality of life. It's not always just about sitting between these lines and having this perfect data point and being like, well, this is what you have. This must be how you address it. Well, what about the
Right.
rest of my life? What about, I want to look holistically. What's happening at home? What's happening in my movement, my spiritual groups, my community?
Hmm.
These things weigh in on the choices I make. And it's not, sometimes I think we get so siloed in the, you know, falling into these perfect little medical boxes. And that's just not it. It's not how it should be.
Well, you use that word holistic, and yeah, to some people they think that's is super woo, but really you're talking about every you know, everything with longevity, with decline in health, with everything, and
Mm.
it's not just what's going on at the doctor's office. But you're right; it's what's going on um, at home with that caregiver. It's going on with their sleep patterns, their TV patterns, their communication, their anxiety, all of these things that are the soft things really play a big part in the physical things as well. And I think you're exactly right. The more I dive into this, and I saw this even with my late mother. I mean, it's all intertwined. It's completely intertwined. You can't really silo these things because they all impact everything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. It's,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh.
You're good.
um, Tell me a little bit. We're talking about this being your own advocate. I mean, I want to stay on that for a second. In being your own advocate, sometimes things get lost in translation. And you had shared with me a story, I think, with your own mother about having medication or things that happen within a shift change or a handoff or something like that. Let's talk a little bit about that, about what can go wrong and why having your own information and access to that and being able to speak up is so important.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like even just stepping back from there, because everyone communicates so differently. I
Uh-huh.
might get a one-word text from my brother, and then my sister calls, and it's a 2-hour conversation. And then I might have, my partner who isn't about checking group chats. He's like, I'm good. That's too long. I'm out.
Right.
And then my mom, who's going to leave, sticky notes everywhere. And maybe a dad who's like, I don't want to talk about it. There's a little bit of this aversion to things. And so even just understanding that people communicate differently, and then understanding that a lot of that information often lives, when you talked earlier about looking for patterns and being able to
Mm-hmm.
identify and understand how things are, changing over time. My sister might know that my mom didn't sleep well last night because she stayed with her, but I don't know that. So when I'm showing up the next day and,
Mm-hmm.
my mom seems a little bit more agitated and I have no context as to why, I'm making decisions in the dark because that information wasn't captured, it wasn't shared. 'Cause then you
Mm-hmm.
start to get busy and life is wild, so you're trying to coordinate care, you're trying to work. You've got your brother who's over there sending one-word updates because he's wrangling his kids.
Right.
Maybe real-time phone calls across state lines become difficult because you've got the time zone. And so then you're starting to miss information. It's not getting
Mm-hmm.
shared, it's somehow getting lost, it's sitting out there. And I feel like what that ends up doing is evoking this emotional response of guilt. So I feel guilty when someone asks me a question and I don't know how to answer it because I don't feel informed. Or I
Mm-hmm.
feel like I'm probably forgetting important information that I should have remembered because I've got so many different things flying through my mind. Or maybe I'm feeling guilty because I snapped at my sister because she asked the same question as she asked yesterday. And I'm like, why can't you
Right.
remember this? Why don't why do I feel like I'm the only one that's managing this? And that emotional build and burnout, that
Mm-hmm.
piece is that just hits deep. And so that situation, thinking about how people communicate, I've always had empathy and understanding, like, we're never going to be perfect, but there's got to be a better way of capturing and jumping off from the same point. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you had asked about my mom and what had happened, I made the assumption, right? You assume she's in a medical setting. She had just ended up having surgery, broke her hip. She was in rehab, and there was a new nurse on shift. And they're in a system also. It's just like, what us family caregivers operate in. We'd always live in the perfect system where you feel like you have enough time to get current or, provide the care that is expected. And so didn't get current on the notes,
Mm-hmm.
administered the wrong medication, and had a life-changing stroke that day, and
Mm,
it was something that could have been prevented. It was a communication gap, and it turned into a whole snowball effect because, you know, information was missed and not appropriately reviewed, and that handoff, process when you're shifting care, we're all going between and we're trying to work as a network, whether it's family or professional, but
right.
you can have really major, sometimes minor, sometimes major impact, and I just don't believe we need to, there's a better way. We don't
Yeah.
need to be going through it. It was a nightmare to live. It was and that's our story, but I can't even imagine. I can't tell you how many families I've talked to that have had similar stories where because of that misinformation there's been a safety situation or there's been, some sort of conflict that's arised with the
Hmm.
family or
Yeah.
something that takes more time, takes more motion. Um,
We'll get back to the conversation in just a second, but I want to thank our partner, Innerhive. They're an app that helps caregivers record, transcribe, and share medical appointment and care updates that keep families organized, informed, and on the same page. Look, caregiving shouldn't feel like it's a game of telephone. You know how it goes. Mom goes to the doctor, and your sister hears one thing, your brother hears another, and by the time it gets to you, none of it makes sense. And it's not because people don't care, it's because there's so much info to keep straight. That's why I partnered with Innerhive. They're designed to bring clarity and calm to caregiving. Look, you just hit record during a doctor's visit or important care conversation, and Innerhive automatically transcribes and summarizes everything that was said. It organizes it into one secure place. It lets you share it with your family or care team. There's no more confusion. There's no more, well, what did the doctor say again? There's no back and forth text. Everyone gets the same version of the facts without the chaos. Download the automatic note taker today at innerhive.com and start caring with confidence. Now let's get back to the conversation. And
it's
yeah, I
intense.
think the difficult thing there is the person who the patient, the person who's going through it right there, they can't speak up. Oftentimes, they can't advocate for
No.
themselves. They can't say, "Hey, whoa, what about this?" And I know. I mean, I know people who are providers and nurses and doctors and in the profession. I know people who've
Hmm.
been umpteen jillion people who've been patients. And yeah, nobody wants to be the pain in the ass. Nobody does. But sometimes, it's okay to say, hey, whoa, what about this? Or to ask a question. Or if you're that adult child or that caregiver or that family member, that's it. It's okay to say, hey, what about this? And to question it. And I think sometimes, you know, you know, people tend to fall on one, side of the coin or the other. But more often, I think they just assume, well, they're the professionals, they know. And while they may
Yeah, yeah,
know, I think that's the thing. And I'd love to hear a little more about this. I know you have some great examples of just, you know, how the system is broken. I mean, there are some serious cracks where things fall through on this. And having this type of data, and I'm not talking about, I think it's important for anybody that's just watching this or coming in the middle. We're not talking about having your detailed patient record on this. We're talking about just being able to have a record, a recording or synopsis of the meetings, the doctor's visits, so you know what was said. There's no misinterpretation. It's not, well, mom said this and she mispronounced it or got it wrong. You have the real facts here, and facts are, we're dealing with an emotional situation, but we have to deal with
yeah.
something that's very factual and dry, and it's so important.
Yeah, I wanna know I want all of us when we're collaborating, I don't want anyone to feel like I'm interpreting something or I'm missing something, and so when you can capture something at the source and then you
Yeah.
can share it, that alone when we speak about family dynamics and friction, we had one family who was similar situation, right? They're carrying across state lines. They have two other siblings, and one of them is primarily extending the most care for their mom. And one
Hmm.
of the things they had expressed was it's really frustrating because I'm having a hard time articulating. I don't have the time to keep up and send these, 5-page updates at the end of the day. And I'm getting calls and I'm getting texts, and I have people that are curious, and I'm just struggling to run my own life and keep up on this. And it would be really great if there was a fast way of capturing the information for every care conversation, whether at home or out, or even an observation. We have people that will use it for observations around, physical therapy, occupational therapy, shifts that are happening, because then you can start to see patterns. You can start to recognize where
Hmm.
there's gaps. You can start to get ahead of things. You can also share, and it builds empathy. And so when you're capturing this at the source, you're all starting from the same information. So you get
Uh-huh.
to collectively bring your community, your family in, and then, that's valuable because
Yeah.
it's not me feeling like I'm carrying and my siblings don't get it. It's now we're all starting here, we're jumping on a call, and I'm bringing them in and they feel like they're present even when they're not.
The family dynamics, that's a big one in anything. It doesn't matter at what stage in this journey you're at, but you're right. Every family member processes it differently, and inevitably, if it's handled one way if you're an only child, okay, or it's just you. But then the moment you bring siblings or other people in the mix, people just
Mm.
process things differently. They communicate differently. They handle and bring different tools. Some people just stroke the check. Some people are there in the mix every day doing the heavy lifting. And that causes
Yeah.
a lot of resentment there. And if you're not communicating, or at least having an understanding of what the other person wants and can do, boy, that's some big problems ahead right there.
Yeah, there's a holistic impact for sure, but even when we were talking before about, when you're bringing in, families have to advocate and they're working with professionals or in the medical setting, even just starting there, it was 2024, the Joint Commission had released an updated report and they were able to make a little bit of improvement, but it was still 60%, 67% of serious, like preventable events were a result of communication issues. And like 80% of medical errors actually start with people think, oh, it's a medication mistake or maybe it's a misdiagnosis. It actually starts at the core with communication. So 80% of those problems start there. And then when you start to think about, oh wow, how many, like what percentage of those are actually preventable? And
Hmm.
then you it snowballs. And then from there you have so many people that, right, it's your life, it's things that are changing. It's so then you enter the realm of lawsuits. And so even just malpractice claims, I mean, you've got almost 30% and accounting for when you're going back to the root cause, it's a communication situation.
Hmm.
Um, so these are preventable things. I know it's wild when you
It
start to
is
like
it is wild.
quantify stuff. You're like, wow.
Yeah, and you're just trying to get through the day. I think that's the hard part, which makes me think of caregiver burnout and overwhelm. And again, that's not a word to be taken lightly. And, I know throughout this year, any of the caregiving info that we put up there on advanced adulting, I mean, the comments will break your heart because we often think, and rightfully so, we should think about, the day-to-day activities, care, well-being, happiness of that individual. But the stats are incredible about how caregivers not only get burned out, but and oftentimes become ill themselves. And whether that's physically, whether
Mm-hmm.
that's another illness, or just mentally, the emotional breakdown that occurs and erodes from that.
Yeah. There's some data a couple years ago and they were trying to quantify, and there's still a lot of research being done around this. But, right now, cognitive decline is something that is impacting a lot of families and individuals in our country. And, there's different forms of how that kind of progresses and takes and different labels, if you will. But individuals that are caring for those that have dementia, they were
Hmm.
reporting that it takes 5 to 7 years off of your life as a caregiver. So when you're speaking of a lot
Wow.
of times caregivers will pass before the care recipient, it's because of the complexity of care. It's because of that pressure and that weight and, the lack of tools and being in a system that are actually helping people get through. It doesn't need to be perfect, but I mean, a lot of times having clarity, having connection, that is what builds resilience. And resilience is what gets you through. And without it, that's when the burnout starts to creep in. And so you need these tools to get through these situations, just as you need a support network to be
Hmm.
there to help, help you navigate through. And so we have this at our fingertips. We have the ability to improve and to be more resilient and to not let this burnout cycle keep growing. It's I don't know.
Well, and I think it's
His
unfortunately, the system is broken in a lot of different ways. And, look, it's the way of so many people, hey, look, I'll, dang it, I'll take care of it myself. I'll take care of myself here. I won't speak up on this. I don't want to be seen as weak. I've got to be there for them. Whatever, everybody's a little different, but we hold on to a lot of this. And I think that's, especially on the provider side who are seeing this every day. And again, their heart's in the right place, and they're in most cases they're doing great work. But you told me an example of a story, or an example of one of your friends who had taken who's just so burnt out and taking their mother to an appointment, and how really tone deaf some of the providers were on keep coming back and coming back. Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, yeah. Uh, and this is not, I don't mean any judgment because they're there and they're there with the focus and the lens of caring for the care recipient. But
Right.
often we go in and we're there in support of, and we're human. At the core, you can see, you can witness, you can understand, you can feel there's an undercurrent of emotion that's present. And my friend has been navigating this with her mom. She's helping her through cancer, and her dad had just recently had fallen, had hip surgery, hip replacement, and so there's a snowball effect happening there. So now she's got two individuals, and she has her own company, her own life. She's trying to figure that out, and so this has been going on for a couple years. And she recently went, and she's went into the doctor. She's having a conversation. They're going over stuff, and one of the things, when you're going through treatment, is you have to make sure that your numbers, or they'll typically do a blood work to understand, like, is your body in a place where it can handle treatment, and if it's
Hmm.
not, then they'll ask you to come back at a later time. So she was in that situation where she had gone there, and this is not around the corner. This is an hour drive. A lot of us don't have the luxury of being right there in the thick of a city. You're having to put effort and time into commuting to get to these places where there is care.
Hmm.
And so you're driving there, she's having conversation, the doctor's saying, "Not in a good place, can't do this, but also I have another specialist I'd like you to see. We can get you in this week. Maybe you can swing by tomorrow, you can do this test. I'll see if I can get you in there, and then, in a week or so, we'll reevaluate." And she's like, "Do you see me right now? I am barely here. I'm disheveled. I don't know if I've eaten. I
Right.
don't know when I slept last. You want me to come back tomorrow and then again later this week and then again next week? And you want me to capture and retain all of this information? And you're not even asking me, like, hey, how you doing? Are you okay over there? Are you going to make it in and out of this room okay?" So, I mean,
Hmm.
even the caregiver is falling through the cracks. We're not thinking about the person that's extending care, and you're
Right.
doing it, and it's not for lack of compassion, it's not for lack of love. We get so
Hmm.
immersed in wanting to provide care and make sure that someone is safe and make sure that their wellness is taken care of, but in the whole process, you miss the flags, and then now you've got two people that need care. Oftentimes the caregiver is completely missed, and that's a whole nother, yeah. We're just trying to, that's the whole point of tools. Let's give them the tools to get through because we don't want them to burn out. We don't want them to be another care situation. We actually want them to have the space to be present emotionally and care. Most people want to be there. Some people, there's different dynamics. It's not the same for everyone, but they're not looking to, that's not their life mission to burn out. They really want
No.
to love and give back and pay it forward, but they need help. They need tools.
Let's talk about tools for a second. Let's talk about your tool and kind of why. Give me the cliff notes on that and how that's going to alleviate some of this burnout for someone caring for a loved one.
Yeah, I mean, earlier we talked about, you kind of gave an example of going into a doctor's appointment in the telephone game with family. I mean, just imagine if you were to repeat that situation and you show up and you're able to pull out your phone. Technology is there to enhance your ability to be present. It
Hmm.
captures the information, it summarizes it, it organizes it, and you walk out of that meeting and you're super clear on what are the highlights and what do I need to do next. You don't need the
Hmm.
10 pages. You rarely do people visit, the 10-page care plan or get immersed in the details, but they absolutely want to know the highlights of, hey, what are the things that are shifting and where I need to put my focus and share with family? And then what requires my immediate attention and action now? And I mean,
Hmm.
just that right there, the clarity that you get, and then being able to bring your network in, huge. You
Yeah.
you take a different situation and it's 2 minutes a day. Just voice first is so powerful. Capture it, talk about your day, let it get summarized, share it with
Hmm.
family. You have a reference of the notes. You can go back and revisit. You can share. You can look for patterns. Um, yeah, it changes the whole trajectory of care.
And I think that's so important too. It's not just, hey, when recording in the doctor's office and recording those appointments and meetings, super important. I mean, just this past year, Shannon had a surgery, and I went with her in those meetings because she's like, I need another set of ears on this to in case you hear something differently, or if I'm caught up in
Yep.
something. And I think that's the case for a lot of it. Is you are not present. You're there, but you may be thinking of it emotionally. If you're the patient, you may be thinking of it emotionally. You may not be grasping the whole thing. You may not think of all the questions right there, and having another set of ears on it is smart, and but they can't always you can always have someone in that room with you. So having this that other people can listen to it factually would be great. But I think the other thing you hit on is so important. It's the, hey, tell me what's going on today. Tell me what's happening in your life. Just
Yeah.
kind of the whole caregiver report. Um, it's not just something that's a limited use. It's really for every aspect of your life.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the telephone game, you joked about from childhood, but I
Yeah.
can't even imagine when you start to play that now when you're coming out of surgery or you're playing that game with someone's medication schedule and it's like, maybe you went and you came home or maybe you had, her sister or brother drop her off at home
Right.
and you don't know when you get home how's
Yeah.
she doing? Does she have her meds? Like you walk in but you have no idea what happened. And so, yeah, that
Or you picked
doesn't
the
feel
wrong
good
sibling.
and it makes
You picked the sibling that forgets stuff. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, but it does
Yeah.
it's like right, when you're extending care, there's something emotional about that too because, we talked about the guilt and the feeling of being able to answer and be there and questions and all of that earlier, but there's also something that feels very real to me that if you're in that situation, it almost makes someone that's competent feel incompetent and unprepared, and it brings you down because you just feel completely bummed out that you're here to advocate for this person, you're here to support them, and you don't even feel like you have all the information. You're not armed. You're missing your armor.
Yeah. Completely. The other thing I think is interesting, let's talk about this for a second. So, it's, and this is for anybody who really understands, what it is. Every, my, when I first heard of Innerhive and you all, my first thing was, oh, it's like Otter or Read AI or something like that we use in business almost every day, because I have AI listening to my conversations, my Zoom calls, anything like that. And it tracks it, gives me a transcript, but also will give me a summarization and interpretation of that as well. And so that's a use that I think most everybody can understand, but we don't really apply something like that. And what I love about what you've done is it has a very specific, you know, patient oriented caregiver bent to it. And so it's just another great use of tech and AI and something you can really use.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much information. Like I said, understanding the highlights, letting technology run, it's ambient, if you will, it's sitting in the background.
Hmm.
You're still there. You're still present. And just as you said, if you can't go with your partner to, uh, a conversation, to an
Yeah.
appointment, to a surgery, a procedure, you
Yeah.
have the ability to have this. So it's almost like a sense of you have a peace of mind, right? Because you feel like you're there. You've got this information captured. You've got the important stuff shared with you.
Hmm.
Um, yeah,
Tell me your story on this, your origin story. What I love about founders in this space is, very few of them got into it because they say, "Hey, here's a great lucrative market." It's usually a personal story that put them in this, and they came from very different backgrounds. So, tell us a little bit about how what was the trigger for you to say, "Hey, we need this, and here's who we can help."
yeah. I never imagined my path back to wellness would start in my closet. I was kind of a tech veteran who had helped build. I had the opportunity to sit in multiple roles, multiple companies, small, big, private, public, like you name it, all high growth, all had, positive exits. And so that's all I knew. That was my world. But I didn't understand what it felt like to actually do something that was meaningful and something that was purpose driven and personal. And
Hmm.
so when I was kind of in a place and felt like I was retreating to my closet and felt like the world was too heavy to carry, that was kind of that's when I realized something has to change. This isn't this isn't good. This isn't right. Clearly I was missing the burnout, but also I'd spent my entire career being curious, learning every aspect of business, understanding and learning how to influence. I was really grateful for being surrounded by people and in situations that afforded me that opportunity, but I never got to do something personal. I never got to be part of and had the option and the choice to go, I have a lot of conviction about this. I want to do this. And I was totally running on empty when we were, caring for family. And my mom and my uncle, two different conditions, dementia and cancer, trying to just keep life together. And we naively thought, oh, we're remote. It was the pandemic. A lot of families, were navigating and learning new things. No, that was not easy. That was not. This was not something simple. And moving people across country, reestablishing 2 different conditions, and so the irony wasn't lost on me. Wellness had always been kind of at the center of my life. It was my North Star, if you will. Um, but apparently I needed a wake-up call because I needed to I had a little bit of a breakdown turned breakthrough moment, I guess you could say. And so it kind of started with unexpected conversations. Like I used to keep everything close to chest, and I was someone that always felt like the best approach was showing up informed and polished, and people didn't need to see the messy side of me. But I learned throughout my career that seeing the messy side, seeing you there, hands in the dirt with the team, seeing you not know all the answers and the information, like that's actually real. That's raw. That's leadership that
Right.
people can connect with. And so when I was going through this, I was really struggling at a different company. I was trying to understand like how much of this do I expose or not. And so I started having conversations with some of my friends and then some with colleagues. And that was kind of the moment where I realized we actually have a shared understanding. It was this isn't just me. Like there's other people out there. They have different loved ones. They're going through the same chaos. They're feeling the same burnout, the same like shutdown and isolation. And
Hmm.
so it became very personal for both me and my team. And that when we talked earlier about kind of rallying around that information overload, that was just we felt so compelled to do that because the inability to stay present when you're trying to capture everything was so real.
Yeah.
And so many of the families that we talked to, it was like that was the first step of like, how can we provide immediate relief and value? And that's where we got a resounding, I need help here. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of our starting place. That was the anchor for Innerhive.
And so, what is available for anybody, right? I mean, this is just for, it's not just for, for caregivers, family caregivers, but you use it for the home caregiver or the patient themselves. Anybody can use it, right?
Anybody can use it. Yeah, we actually have someone who works with, so she's a professional and she's in the dementia space, and she actually works with families with that focus from an OTPT perspective. And
Hmm.
so when we were chatting, she had a family that was using this. It kind of escalated to her, and she's like, "Oh, this is cool. Let me check it out." And so she started using it for herself. Young woman, very clear. She's like, "I'm just a busy person, and I have my own physical therapy, and I have my own things I want to stay current on." So
Yeah.
she actually uses that, and so we've been really fortunate that we designed for people that are extending care, and we
Hmm.
we knew that largely it's often in the adult child, it's that sandwich generation. They're taking care of their own family and their aging
Right.
parents. But we've had so many people that are partners. We've had people that are just busy and they want to advocate for their own wellness. We've had like the feedback loop of from our users has been really valuable. We've had one caregiver, and this was super uh, really sweet. So he was sharing that the family dynamic is a little rough. He ended up,
Hmm.
bringing his mom in. He's now a full-time live-in care partner. His mom is kind of navigating dementia. Well, she's nonverbal. And so
Oh, wow.
being able to interpret that and to understand, that brings a whole nother level of complexity. So a lot of times when siblings are asking how's she doing or what's going on, or it's not like you can just relay conversations you had because she's not able to speak in the same way
Right.
that's easy to translate. And so he ended up using our voice recording, and he actually uses it every day to kind of talk through and summarize his to-do and the care list routines because he
Hmm.
can capture that and then share it with his siblings so they feel like they're there, they understand what's going on. But even more special, he captures the vocalizations so that they
Oh.
can actually feel like they're there and they can hear and understand. And so that gives a new meaning and new life when he's trying to say, here's what mom and I did, and here's how, she expressed her emotion around it, because it's different than what, most people would interpret or be able to articulate. So it's been awesome to see the community just show us different ways of how it's working for them.
Hmm.
We have another individual who she is a sandwich caregiver. So she has her own child and she's caring for her parents. And she uses, the audio first, but she uses it from like a journal perspective. So
Oh,
how are
that's
they
great.
feeling? What are the observations? What are they doing? Because that emotional support and that, people, whether this is the appropriate label, we've got so many different things happening in the world, but a lot of people are talking about, a lot of times when you're in these situations and you hit burnout, well, the next thing that starts to happen is those that are around you in your presence or that are in your family or you're caring for, they might have some challenge with, mental stability, or they might have some some challenges there that end up coming because of what they're witnessed or what they're feeling or what they're struggling to, to kind of get out. And so having that place to just purge and feel like you can, express some of those emotions and then look
Hmm.
back and go, okay, how was I feeling last week? What was a constant thread because it had a good week and I want to repeat that? Or,
Right.
if it was a bad week, maybe I want to not repeat that. So,
Well, I think it's funny is I've always said the best, sometimes the best and cheapest therapy is journaling, and this is just kind of another. That use of it is like another offshoot of that, because you're right. Sometimes you just got to talk it out, and if you're just talking it to you and the dog, or you and into your phone, and knowing, I think that, not to get all off subject, but really that shows where you were at that moment, not only what you were feeling, whether it's good or bad, but it shows growth as well. And I think that's important, not only if you're caring for someone else, but also just for yourself too. What am I going through with this? And to
yeah,
see that you have, and it's so important for everybody in this. But you have good days and you have bad days. Yeah. It's not, it's some days you're the windshield, some
totally.
days you're the bug.
Yeah.
And to recognize that and to be able to see that and, pull on that is an important thing.
Well, I think that's the beauty of information. You just hit it on the head. Information is like all this stuff, but when you can actually take information and structure it in a way where you can get insight out of it and you
Yeah.
can start to see your others around you can start to see those patterns, it becomes so much more clear. How
Hmm.
do I help or what can I do differently or and that awareness that it raises just by going through that practice and that process is
Hmm.
huge because a lot of times you suppress, you don't think about it, you're not aware, or maybe you're aware but you really don't want to be aware. So when you start to see that kind of bubbling up in that pattern over time or other people are seeing it and recognizing it, it makes it a little bit easier to be there for support and take action.
Yeah. Hey, I want to tell people that are watching now. So if we'll put the information in the notes below, but if one, and I highly recommend it, you check Innerhive out. Okay. It's an app. Okay. So we're talking about so this may sound complicated. It's not, it's just remarkably simple. So it's just an app you can download and use, and super, super simple, to do. So we'll put the information below and recommend that you do that so you can check Crystal and her company out and download that app and start using it for all the reasons that we've talked about. Um, what are you most excited about right now? Can be anything. Can be work, life, anything.
Well, there's a lot that excites me. But I think influence, I've always felt really strongly about who's influencing who. And so I think a lot of our conversation today, we've centered around like, how can the family advocate for themselves? How can the family have a voice? What does that look like? And my personal situation that I went through a couple weeks ago and the fire that that gave me, I think I'm really excited to just keep putting the power back in our own hands. Like, there is absolutely a power imbalance that's happening. And I think families, we should be informed. And I want clarity and I want my information to be able to plan and choose and design my life and I want to then also, share that with others that can help me. And so I'm sick of red tape bureaucracy. I just give me the facts. Information is agency. And I
Yeah,
really want to freaking have more influence from a family perspective. We need it.
love it. Wow, I know a lot of people are going to love that too, and probably feel the same way. They just maybe hadn't thought about it that way. It's awesome. All right, so you have a time machine, and you can go back 20, 30 years, and you get to spend the afternoon, have coffee with yourself. What advice would you give your younger self?
A time machine. I don't
Yeah.
want a time machine. I put that time machine down, let it collect dust because I don't know about you, but the person I was when I was younger, there's no way she's listening to any advice that I have to say. I was
You're
way too
right.
busy
Yeah.
dreaming and like trying to optimize my future that I think probably I was so busy. I'm such a forward thinker and I love to
Yeah.
dream and think about like what am I going to do 10, 20 years from now that sometimes I
Yeah.
miss the present. And so that's a lesson that I've learned over time. I don't think some pieces of wisdom you can't shortcut. Like, I really just think you have to live through
Right.
some of the experiences to learn them. And I
Yeah.
had to have those character building moments that shaped me. So if I had a time machine and I went back and tried to tell my younger self, nah, she's not listening. Besides, I don't know if I change that trajectory anyway, wouldn't that mean then I'm preventing a situation or a mistake from happen, which means that the learning that came from it just gets wiped.
Mhm.
And I don't know that I want that. I feel like I'm a little bit of like, I need it right in my face. I need love the wisdom, gonna listen, love instructions, love rules, gonna read it all, gonna listen. Probably need to go through the pain and figure it out like on my own. So, yeah, I don't know.
I love that. You're the first person who said that, but it's so true. I mean, you think of, you know, I refer to it as young, dumb, and bulletproof. Okay. When I was in my, early
Oh,
20s, you think you have all the answers, and you're looking at somebody in their 40s, 50s or beyond and just going, yeah, keep talking, whatever. But you're right. These lessons,
yeah,
I've hated so many of them, but that's the only way that you could have learned them is going through that, and it's so funny. I've had that conversation with my own kids. I've had that
yeah.
conversation a lot lately with people when we talk about ageism, and as an offshoot, but I do a lot of work
Mm,
with, careers. I was a former headhunter, and, people talk about ageism. Well, it's wrong. Yeah, it's wrong. It sucks. It shouldn't happen. Guess what? It's going to continue to happen till the end of time
it
because,
does.
when you're
Yeah,
20, you're an idiot. And you don't realize that one day you're going to be that person. And our parents said it
yeah.
before us and their parents of just you wait till you're this age, and it's to your point.
It's
You gotta some things you just have to live. You just have to experience firsthand
yeah.
and put your hand on the stove.
Yep. Yeah, I know myself too well. That would be something that would absolutely collect dust. I would be cool to have like a future. You want to talk about like a future? Can I have a time machine that brings me forward?
Okay, I've
And
never
maybe
flipped
ask
that.
my future self like,
All right. Well, tell me. So what? Yeah. What would that look like? So you can, you you can go forward. That's a good take. You can go forward. What would you ask them? What would you want to know? What would you hope that they would tell you that your 20, 20-year older self would say?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like maybe I'd gain some perspective that I could use
Hmm.
now in the future. And something that's interesting that just hooked me when you said it was, um, you had made mention of, when people are like, when you're my age, you wait. And I do feel like something that would be valuable in a time machine, forward or back, whatever that looks like, is people have these moments where they're like, I wish I could go back to that moment. And I never understood what that meant. And so when you're
Hmm.
young and people are like, "Oh, I loved when I was in college," and just savor the moment. And so I think
Yeah.
if I went forward, I would remind myself that right now, I'm probably living in someone else's. I wish I could go back to that moment.
Yeah.
So, like, put the brakes on, Crystal, breathe, have a moment, like, understand what it means, appreciate living in this moment because all those small things and collectives that you think matter in the end, like, people are going to remember how you treated them. They're going to remember how you made them feel, who you were is so much more important than what you did. I think, like the way you show up and your character and the essence of that. And so, yeah, I think my future self would be like, listen, you're in someone else's, like, if I could go back to that moment,
Yeah.
appreciate it, live in it. You are building your legacy. Forget about like people think, oh, I want, when I'm older, I want this to be my legacy. I'm like, you are the legacy. You are it right now. What you were
Yeah.
doing today, the present, like this is it. It's happening. Like it's growing, it's building. Um, so yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
What if
Tomorrow's not
what if
guaranteed.
right
So
now, we always talk about, oh, the good old days. Remember the good old days? What if you're living the good old days right now? Because you're going to look back and go, this
I
moment
know.
today, that was really the good old days, and you didn't recognize it at all.
Yes, yes, that I love it. That yes. Cause yeah, my
That's
old
good.
self needed that. My current self needs that. I still struggle. I need people to like reel me in and go, hey, today. Don't worry about 10, 20, 50, I get so excited. I'm such a system big picture dreamer
Hmm.
that I really need, someone to anchor me in today. So yeah, I think that's so true. This
Good
is the
stuff.
moment. All right. In 5, 10
All
years from
right.
now, I wanna chat again and then you're gonna
All
remind
right.
me,
Yeah, we
remember
get the
that day
update.
when we were talking about? This is
That's
the
good.
moment? Yeah.
Good stuff. Crystal Gallo, doing good work. Keep it up. And thanks for being on Advanced Adulting.
This was awesome. I love having this chat with you. Thanks, Bradley.